Okay, thank you very much. I am from the East Coast as well, from Halifax, and I'm mostly a basic scientist. So thank you very much for letting me delve into this session. I'm also a clinician who's been doing some work in Prince Edward Island. And Prince Edward Island has very vigorously been pursuing a multi-phased institution of what could be considered to be a hepatitis C elimination program, slowly but surely. And the work that I'm going to talk about today is in the context of the first phase of that program. But really, I'm not here to talk about that plan. I'm here to tell you a little bit about our work in a correctional setting and doing research in a correctional setting. So how many people in the room are involved in care with a corrections-based group? So a few people. Care of any kind. So congratulations and thank you for doing that work. It's not the easiest thing in this world to do, and they're a group of individuals who really need everything that we can provide for them. So the other authors on this paper are members of the Department of Justice in Prince Edward Island, and I think that's important because they are true partners in this project, without which it never would have happened. And so the acknowledgement, you can imagine that this takes a great deal of coordination and effort and diligence from a large group of individuals, some of whom only I've listed here, but they include partners within government, partners within our academic institution, as well as private partners through industry as well. And without these people, none of this work would have happened. So we've heard a lot about sort of hepatitis C, risks for infection and reinfection, and what that means in the context of cure. A little bit of what I look at from a basic science perspective is immunity and hepatitis C immunity and what happens after cure, particularly in the context of direct-acting antivirals. And we designed this study, so it's a post-marketing study. The drug that we used was Hocurapac, and we looked at individuals who had genotype 1, and our goal here was to treat individuals in a dedicated correctional setting. And what I mean when I say that is that all of the individuals who were eligible to go on to the drug, which is an already Health Canada approved medication, were within the correctional setting at the time that they were enrolled in the study. They were treated standard of care, connected with some of the enhanced counseling as it exists on PEI at the moment, as well as opioid substitution therapies where appropriate, treated for a standard of care, and then we followed them up. The research part of this that's different from what you would expect to find in a standard of care within the community is that we were doing additional blood draws. So I'm the vampire of the Prince Edward Island correctional setting at the moment. Not the easiest folks to get blood from, in fact, not the best veins going either, so that's been a real challenge. But the difference here that's important to remember is that they were having additional blood draws. The remainder of the care was standard of care, but we were also accessing health information for the purposes of looking at clinical outcomes as well as demographic information. So that was done for research purposes only in a group of individuals who were being enrolled while they were in an incarceration setting. So they were in a correctional facility, which nobody gasped. I've done this talk and people gasp when I say that. No gasps, that's great. And then we're following people up for about a year afterwards. And again, we're looking at the standard clinical outcomes, but we're also doing a heck of a lot of work with hepatitis C immunity and looking at reinfection rates on the island. So what's the big deal? Anyone here remember who this is? Gary Coleman? Yeah? Different strokes? Yeah, some nods? Yeah, I'm getting older. I've realized I showed this slide in another context and everyone's like, who's this guy? Anyway, not what you're talking about, Willis, but what's the big deal? So why am I up here talking to you about what seems to be standard of care treatment being given to people in an appropriately genotype 1 setting? Treating people as part of a study, even if the drug is not investigational, but the questions are, and enrolling them in the context of being in a correctional setting has its challenges. In the last 45 years, there have been few published phase 4 studies that are drug intervention studies in dedicated correctional facilities. And that's because there has been a great deal of anxiety about coercion and difficulties with studies that happened in the 1960s that led to the safeguards for research that we have currently for research in human subjects. And I hate the word subjects, but there it is, subjects. Human subjects. And so people that are in correctional settings have been considered to be a vulnerable population, another term that I know some people will nod at and some people will cringe at, but they are considered to be a vulnerable population. And some of the big ethical and other principles that people have been worried about, and rightly so, as we all are as researchers, many of us are in this room, about equity. So the traditional view has been that we worry about equity from the point of view of making sure that people have access to care. But in this particular setting, with these particular individuals, I would be more concerned about worrying about equity for access to opportunity to be offered the ability to be in a study just like anyone else would be. Of course, in this setting, this is a non-voluntary, for the most part. Nobody heads into the correctional facility of their own accord. It's a very coerced situation in terms of the fact that they are there against their will, and there's been considerable difficulty in understanding whether or not people can truly provide informed consent to be in a study in that setting. Justice and then risk to benefit ratio. In particular, whether or not the research has a significant benefit that outweighs the risk to the individual. Now, we worry about that in research all the time, but in the context of an incarcerated individual, is that different, and are people able to provide informed consent? So those were 4 of the main things that we were concerned about thinking about before we decided to do this study. And so we had convened an independent advisory board, I'll call it, but it was a group of individuals who spanned a large group of expertise and life experience, including individuals who had been corrections experienced, as well as individuals from ethics, from the health point of view, as well as legal people as well. And this group of individuals provided some guidance on how we might move forward in the context of doing this study. The recommendations and suggestions that they had are listed here. So each individual that we see, we do not approach the individuals that are involved in this study directly. It is the individuals who are contracted to be the healthcare providers at this particular corrections institution that approach the individuals at first. And they ask them if they would like to hear about the study once they have been determined to be hepatitis C positive. If they say yes, we go in and we do what we would do with any other person who's considering being involved in a research study. But the difference here is that we offer them an advocate that is from the John Howard Society and completely independent of the Department of Justice and our study team. They also fill in anonymous, if they decide to be in the study, anonymous confidential feedback forms, which again are not available to myself or to the actual Department of Justice. All of that information goes to a version of that advisory board that you saw that advised on the setup of the study. That's an independent group of separate individuals but similar composition that meet 3 times per year to review these confidential feedback forms. And that's the 3rd point there. And then we had a designated clinical pause to review what had happened after we had enrolled either 10 people or we had passed about 3 months. And at that point, the independent advisory board was set to review the feedback from the individuals who were involved in the study. So we'll go through the rest of this fairly quickly. The study is being done in Prince Edward Island. This is the facility. Looks nice in the summer. I was just there and got stuck in a snowbank outside there with all of the charts and stuff that we have to bring in each time we go in there, so that wasn't so much fun. This is our study nurse, and this is the study clinic. As you can see, that there's a couple of things there. Everything comes with us to set up clinic and tear down clinic every single time we go there, so that's a little bit of a challenge. The bottled water that's there is because nobody can drink the water at the facility because it's not good for drinking. So they give us bottled water, but not everybody within the institution gets it. I didn't say that. I won't be going back to PEI anytime soon. So just a couple of quick facts about what we've been doing in the last 8 months since we've started enrolling individuals. So about 78% of the people who were eligible to be involved in the study and were screened. 16% of them were hepatitis C positive, which is approximately what we had expected. The major risk factor in most of these individuals was IV drug use, either past or present, and the majority of these individuals are on opioid substitution therapy where appropriate. 10% of the enrollment was, that's actually higher than that at this point. 14 people were on drug at the moment. 3 of them are pending drug start. And also, an additional benefit from a public health perspective is that individuals were recognized who needed hepatitis B vaccines, and they actually got them in a significant number of cases. And one person who had never received any childhood vaccinations also received their vaccinations. In-house, adherence is great. Drugs work if you take them. Don't laugh. Things can happen even in a correctional setting, and people don't have to do what they're told. I've learned this, I didn't know. Everyone who has reached the SVR point, SVR 12 point has been cured. We have lost 2 of the 17 people that we've actually had to follow up, and that's it. So there are some challenges. It's a long ways away from the center of the universe in Halifax, not Toronto, Halifax. Everything that's done there is done off the edge of a container. We lost all of the study drug, for about 3 hours because someone had packed it up with the toilet paper in the supply room and didn't know what it was. So you're dealing with people that aren't used to doing studies. All the charts and everything that we need go with us. This is the back of our cars. And it took about 2 years from starting conversations with Justice to get this in place. This is a patient who was having difficulties with the water there, but also getting other care in is not always the easiest thing. This is a picture that he gave me permission to use, but it's one of our study subjects. But getting additional care beyond the hepatitis C part hasn't always been the easiest thing to convince people that it's needed. The charts, there's challenges sometimes with confidentiality in this particular setting, particularly when the bar is raised in a research setting. Drugs are dispensed by guards and not necessarily by nurses, so that's sometimes a challenge. And then all of the blood that we take on our vampirous way comes back to the lab, but that's 6 hours away, so we spend our nights on Tuesdays and Friday nights in the lab until about 3 o'clock in the morning. But there have been great parts to this. We've built capacity in terms of bringing FibroScan to the island through the study. And this was an investigator-initiated study that we did with AbbVie. And we've also been able to provide some of the information and share other bits of information with some of the justice people, and other people that we've partnered with as we go along. So I think that's a benefit. So I think in terms of what's the big deal, I think this is one of the first times we've done a dedicated correction study and brought care to these individuals in a research setting, not just a care setting. And I think it provides a precedent that we can feasibly do this on a go-forward basis for people who are in a correctional setting.